Well, I'm delighted to have in the studio with me today Matthew Roberts. Matthew is the minister of Trinity Church in York. He is also one of the founders of the Greater Love Declaration, and he's also an author. He has this splendid book, Pride, Identity and the Worship of Self, which is going to be coming out in just a few weeks, and I strongly recommend that book. Matthew, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
It's a great pleasure, Simon. Thank you for inviting me.
So we're going to do something slightly unusual, which is we're going to watch a bit of video together.
Okay.
But the reason why we're doing this is there was a very interesting exchange which took place recently between the Archbishop of Canterbury and some gay campaigners outside of Lambeth Palace. And you and I have been discussing this, and I thought it was worth having some of that discussion on camera because it's very, very revealing, I think, about the way Christian views on sexual ethics get dealt with. So let's get straight into it, and we'll just watch the first clip and then we'll discuss it.
Okay.
Can you see the way it looks? This looks like those churches in South Africa during apartheid who refused to marry interracial couples. That's what it looks like. It looks like barefaced discrimination. You would never discriminate against black people in the way that you're discriminating against LGBT.
And I work in the Diocese of Central Zambia, and I have had more homophobia in the Church of England than I had in the Diocese of Central Zambia and in Zambia as a whole. I felt safer there than I feel here.
Well, I think that is really bad. And certainly the lack of safety is a worry, is more than a worry, it's a disgrace.
So, a lot of us who hold to the Bible have grave concerns about what the Church of England is saying now about marriage, but these campaigners are obviously coming from the diametrically opposed point of view. They're claiming, Matthew, that for the Church not to marry same-sex couples is equivalent to not marrying interracial couples. Do you think there's anything in that at all?
No, I don't think there's anything in that at all. And I think it's very illuminating the way that this is being described, because what we've got there is a comparison being drawn between refusing to allow people to marry and redefining what marriage actually is. Those are entirely different things. And it's a very strange comparison to draw, but it's very much the way that this argument is advanced is by trying to paint the LGBT issues as if they are the same as racial issues. But in this case, it is an exact opposite. What is marriage? It's the union of a man and a woman. To redefine that is not similar at all.
So why did they make the comparison?
Well, I think because it makes a strong polemical case. We all know that racism is a horrific thing. We're all utterly opposed to racism. Christianity, at its heart, is entirely opposed to the idea that there are distinctions between different human beings because we're all made in the image of God, and Christ has come to call people from every nation under heaven to be united under him. It's a massive biblical theme. So, of course, Christians are deeply concerned about racism. And so it's a rhetorical strategy to try to call a genuine and right concern about racism into play on what is nothing to do with that, but is an ethical issue about what constitutes right sexual behaviour and, more profoundly, what marriage is as part of God's design for humanity.
Why do you think the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't articulate that at all in response to Peter Tatchell there?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I think I'm tempted to say you'd have to ask him, I think. But I think there's a really interesting thing going on in what we've just seen, which is this constant sliding between different issues as if they're the same issue. And we saw that in the comment from the next speaker, who spoke about feeling more in danger or less safe in the Church of England than he did in Zambia. Now, I don't know the situation in Zambia, but that's a pretty extraordinary thing to say. I'm not at all saying that there aren't dangerous people around in every part of the world. But
in the Church of England?
Well, exactly. In the Church of England, are there seriously people who are threatening the safety of those who are campaigning for LGBT rights? I don't think so. There are people who profoundly disagree with this idea that we can redefine humanity, which is what redefining marriage is all about. And so I think that you've got the same thing at play of trying to slide together one thing which is, we all would agree, is deeply awful, in this case, violence against those whom you disagree with something totally different, which is simply disagreeing on an issue and wanting to articulate what authentic Christianity is.
Yes, and we see this a lot, don't we? Weaponizing the safety narrative, weaponizing the harm narrative, weaponizing mental health, right?
Absolutely, yeah, I think that's right. And my heart goes out to the chap, I don't know who he is, but who, if he genuinely feels that he's in danger, we all will be deeply concerned about that. But to blend that issue with a profoundly important issue about the nature of humanity, and particularly when it comes to LGBT rights, there are really significant issues over the safety, the well-being of, well, young people in particular, but those issues are not at all in the way that he's presenting them.
So one of the other people in that video is Jayne Ozanne. People may have heard of her. She is now very hostile to the evangelical position. She's an LGBT activist within the Church of England, and not in the clip that we just played, but she says that this sort of stuff is because of our teaching that we allow in our churches. What do you think she means by that?
Well, isn't that interesting? I think to some extent we kind of may need to play on the video to see a little bit about what she means by that. But certainly she's referring to orthodox standard Christian teaching about what it means to be human, what it means to be male and female, and what marriage is about and why God designed it. But I think we may need to play on this to go, how can we get to the point of imagining that in the Church of England there is genuine danger to people coming from Orthodox Christians? Because that is an extraordinary claim.
Well, let's take a look at the next clip and see if it sheds any light on that.
Did you hear what the Archbishop of Uganda said at Christmas?
Yes, and I publicly rebuked him.
Everybody know, he said it's better for parents to drown their children
He did.
than let them be gay.
And he refuses to come to any meeting that I'm at because I have rebuked him exactly for that.
For that precise view.
For that precise view, and I did so publicly, as I did the Ghanaian church, as I did the Nigerian church, and some of the others haven't yet been caught, but they would get the same review.
So when I first watched this, I thought, there's an archbishop claiming to speak in the name of Christ who said that it'd be better to drown gay kids than to raise them. I was horrified.
Absolutely, well, and wouldn't we all be? Because Christianity, more than anyone else on earth, values the life of children. You know, we're the ones who know a God who became human, indeed who became human in the womb of the Virgin Mary, who lived life from conception through all his childhood to adulthood, and in doing so has honoured childhood, honoured humanity in the most amazing way. So Christians have always been utterly opposed to infanticide. In the Roman Empire, one of the things Christians were most known for is that other people would leave children out to die on the doorsteps, and Christians would collect them up and raise them.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. What a horrific thing.
So that's what Peter Tatchell says.
Yeah.
And the Archbishop of Canterbury says he did. So he affirms that narrative.
Yeah.
But that's not quite the case, is it?
No, it is not the case. It's not the case at all. What the Archbishop of Uganda actually said is that he warned that there were some people who were trying to lead children into homosexual lifestyles, lure them in fact, with incentives. Now, I'm not going to comment on whether he was right on that or not, because I don't know, but that was what he said. But then what he said was he quoted Jesus's words from Matthew 18, which is a stern warning from Jesus to those who try to lead children, or actually not just children, his little ones, by which he means all Christians, into sin. And he quoted Jesus' warning that for those who lead his little ones into sin, it would be better to have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the depths of the sea. Now, what Jesus meant by that was to warn those who might want to advocate sinful behaviour that God judges those kind of things, And
So
you should
God
take
does
it
the
really
judging,
seriously.
right?
God does the judging.
So
we don't.
was it a call by Jesus for us, his disciples, to drown people?
It's hard to state how utterly misrepresented this is of what the Archbishop said.
Right.
Firstly, it's got nothing to do with the children. The Archbishop was speaking about protecting the children. He's concerned about children. He's concerned about children being harmed. And so the whole words was about that. So it's referring to those who teach them. But he certainly wasn't calling for anyone to go and drown people. He was speaking about Jesus' warning about coming judgment for those who...
From God.
From God.
The judgment
yeah,
of God.
From God, that's right.
Yeah.
So it had absolutely no relation at all to what has just been claimed. And so what a perfectly orthodox bishop said in quoting the words of Jesus has been completely turned on its head and inside out and presented as if he had advocated the killing of children. Couldn't have been further from the case.
It is. It's so repulsive. And so Christ's warning about judgment from God, and in context, the Archbishop is talking about adults. Mm-hmm. Peter Tatchell misrepresents as him calling for people to drown gay kids. I mean, this is obviously highly offensive to Christians, but actually it's quite dangerous. I mean, if people watching that believe that there are people in the church who want to drown gay kids, then they might think, well, these are the worst kinds of people. They deserve some kind of retribution. I mean, it's putting people... Is that fair? Or?
Well, absolutely, and it has all sorts of terrifying parallels. I mean, it's got one very clear Christian parallel from the past, which is in the early days of Christianity when it was put around that Christians were cannibals and were eating flesh in their services, which of course was a total lie, but it's a similar kind of level.
Yes, it was a misrepresentation of the bread and the wine.
Absolutely, yeah. So kind of with not the kind of merest resemblance of a few words taken totally out of context and made to mean something totally different. And of course, more recently and in rather more kind of immediately for us, the thing that we're quite familiar with in war situations where people paint their opponents as if they are monsters and try and whip up their supporters. It's really dangerous and incredibly irresponsible to try to paint people whom, okay, you have a severe disagreement with, but to paint them as if they're advocating something which is the very opposite. There's an extra irony here, which not everyone may have spotted, which is that Tatchell himself is very strongly in favour of abortion. And he's spoken out about that a number of times recently online. And of course, abortion is a form of infanticide. It's a form of killing children. So what we've actually had here is a man who does advocate killing children, accusing a man who absolutely does not advocate killing children of being guilty of wanting to kill children. Yeah. And I think that illustrates very well the entirely topsy-turvy nature of what we're dealing with here.
Yeah. Oh, terrible. So the Archbishop of Canterbury, for some unknown reason, seems to confirm this narrative about what had been said about the drowning. Yeah. Let's watch the next clip and see what happens next. The first person to speak in this clip is Jayne, I think.
We don't rebuke the churches here that teach that too.
Oh, we do.
Well, we don't, because they've given privilege.
Well, if you send me, here's a promise. You send me details of a church that is saying something like that, and I will ensure that there is a disciplinary process against the clergy you send.
Well, they're half on synod.
Well, then point them out. With the evidence.
So, apparently, according to Jayne Ozanne, there are churches here, by which he means in the UK, within the Church of England specifically, teaching that gay children should be drowned. So I've asked the question, is there any evidence that this is true?
No, of course there is no evidence that it's true. And I think it's very important for us to observe again what has happened here. So we've started off with a total misrepresentation of Orthodox Christianity, a completely indefensible one. And then the claim has been made that there are churches here in the UK that teach that too. And I don't know whether we caught it right at the end there, but when the Archbishop said, send me information about this, and Jayne Ozanne replies, they're half on synod. So very explicitly, she's said that there are people on the General Synod of the Church of England who advocate the drowning of babies. Now, this is an extraordinary thing to say. Now, I'm not an Anglican, so I'm obviously not on General Synod. I know people who are. I thought I'd better check, so I have contacted a couple of friends of mine who are on General Synod and said, has anyone ever said anything like this on Synod? And of course the answer is no, absolutely not. So what is going on there? What is going on there is, again, this thing of blending together complete opposites as if they're the same thing, taking orthodox Christian teaching on the sanctity of life, the sanctity of marriage, and presenting that as if it is this monstrous, murderous doctrine, when of course it is the very opposite of that.
Yeah, and again, I'm surprised at the Archbishop of Canterbury buying into this idea. Now, to be fair, he says, give me the evidence. And that may have just been his way in that situation, that precious situation of trying to sort of buy time and just saying, I don't really think it's true, but if you can prove it. That may have been what he said. But I think the next clip shows us what Jayne Ozanne has really got in mind.
Yeah.
There are 3 churches in my local area, and the ministers in those churches signed a declaration to say that if conversion therapy was banned, they would still continue to offer it. And
Well,
this is in a student area in Birmingham.
We know it
Right,
happens
there are in this country 15,000 churches. I honestly cannot monitor what's said in every Anglican church. I know, but they have, if you, let me finish before you interrupt, because I've been listening to you, you can listen to me. Send me the details with that bit of paper and their names at the bottom of it, and I will take action.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
Is that good enough?
Yes.
Very good.
So, what declaration do you think that person is referring to when they say that 3 churches have signed a declaration that if conversion therapy is banned, they would still continue to offer it?
Well, that's a good question. What is being referred to here? Well, I think perhaps we can now see why the gentleman who spoke just then said earlier on that he felt unsafe in the Church of England. Probably what he's referring to is a letter that was written by a group which I was part of last year, writing to the government, which pointed out that the terms in which the government had presented their proposals for their so-called conversion therapy ban had actually, in the way that it was drafted, captured Orthodox Christianity as if it was part of the problem. And so this letter was drafted by an interdenominational group of ministers, and it was signed by over 2,500 ministers, and sent to the government basically saying, I don't think you understand we don't think you understand what you're doing here. Of course, we're not going to stop teaching Orthodox Christianity, but this is not conversion therapy. The letter explicitly said, we are not advocating any kind of therapy. We're not advocating any kind of sort of disreputable and harmful and abusive practices. What we're concerned about is that standard, normal Christian teaching about marriage and about holiness and about salvation could end up being outlawed by this ban. And that's still the case.
So this was not a pledge that if conversion therapy is banned, they would still continue to offer it?
No, not at all. Not at all. But of course, the issue there is, again, this sliding together of completely different things. And what campaigners have made very clear is that they consider the kind of horrific things that we hear about happening in the past, of people being given electric shocks and punishment beatings and things to try to change their sexual orientation. Trying to joining that together, which thankfully has been long illegal now, and we're all very pleased about that, trying to join that together with the really good, precious, wonderful Christian teaching that sex is to be restrained to within the lifelong union of one man and one woman in marriage. And saying that if you teach this, which is Orthodox Christianity, which is what Christians have always believed, and for all sorts of good reasons, and the Greater Love Declaration you mentioned earlier on sets out in our theological background all the reasons why marriage is so good for children, for women, for everyone, for the whole of society. But trying to join that together with the idea that punishment beatings and now apparently drowning babies is a good thing. And I think this just illustrates the level of falsehood that is being used to try to advance this agenda.
Yeah, so the Archbishop of Canterbury makes a pledge that if they would send him the piece of paper with the names at the bottom, so the pledge with the names, that he would discipline these people. And we've moved on here from the discussion, the horrible idea about drowning babies, and we're clearly talking about the conversion therapy ban.
Yeah.
Now, accepting that, the mischaracterization, he says it's a letter promising to carry on doing conversion therapy. Should the Archbishop, but we know it's not that, what exactly is it that the Archbishop of Canterbury is pledging to discipline people for, do you think?
Well, I don't think we know the answer to that. I mean, at one level, what he said there was fair enough. He's heard a really serious accusation brought before him, and his response to that is, well, show me the evidence. And I think we'd all want to say that's exactly the right way to respond to a serious accusation is show me the evidence. And so I think at one level, I think we want to say, well, that's really fair enough. This letter, as it was in the public realm, the signatories were published, quite right too, and those who signed it were very happy to have done so. It didn't say any of the things that they've said. So I hope very much that what this means is that the Archbishop, if they do provide this letter, I suspect they will look at it and go, oh, it didn't say anything like that at all, and I've been misled. And so obviously there's no action to be taken. All the letter did was present standard Anglican doctrine of marriage. So it presented what the Church of England's official doctrine still is, pending the outcome of what happens at Synod. So it would be impossible to discipline people for simply believing the standard doctrine that Christians have always taught. So I hope that would be the outcome. However, of course, there is certainly a danger, which is that this whole misrepresentation of the goodness of the gospel as if it were a horrifically evil teaching, if that is bought into, then, well, to act upon that would basically mean every Orthodox clergyman in the Church of England would need to be disciplined. Well, we hope that that won't happen. Having said that, it has been seen in some other denominations that those who stand by what Christianity has always taught and are concerned about all the harm that comes from the violation of marriage in all sorts of ways, it could be the case that they will have action taken against them. We hope it won't.
Matthew, why do people say these things?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Of course, people say things because they want to advance their own agenda and want to be able to argue their point powerfully. But I think there's something slightly more profound going on here, which is that there is, in the whole LGBT way of thinking, a destruction of truth, which is very profound. When you've got to the point where you believe that reality is defined by what we feel, not by what actually is, then actually it becomes a very small thing to not just massage, but as we've seen in this video, invert the truth, invent truth that isn't there and present it as if it is. And so I think that this whole thing shines a light on the fact that what we're dealing with here is not just a kind of detail of Christian ethics that Christians are arguing over. We're actually dealing with two diametrically opposed views as to what reality is. One of those is reality is defined by what we want it to be, in which case you can make up your own meanings to what someone said that may have nothing to do with what they actually said. Or we can believe that truth is defined by the God who made us and revealed by the God who became one of us. Jesus says that his word is truth. And as Christians, truth is a precious, precious thing. And this whole issue that we're dealing with now goes to the heart, really, of what truth is, what reality is, who God is, what it means to be human.
Matthew, I'm so grateful for your willingness to speak out on these issues and for your clarity and your courage and graciousness in doing that. And grateful for all you've been doing with the letter and the Greater Love Declaration. I know that you were in the papers even just last week, writing to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, about the conversion therapy ban. So we're very grateful to you for doing that, and we continue to pray for you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Well, if you want to be kept up to date with how we are responding to calls to ban so-called conversion therapy, then do take a look at our campaign, the Let Us Pray campaign. That's at letaspray.uk, and you can also find us on social media. But for now, thank you for joining us. Goodbye, and God bless.